Hi, I'm Maura. My father, the man everyone feared, once ruled boardrooms like a god. But the night he handed me a sealed envelope and whispered, "You have 24 hours," my life cracked open. Inside wasn't a warning, it was a death sentence. Proof that my husband, the man I shared my bed and my future with, was stealing billions through my father's company and planning to erase us both. They lied to me, smiled at me, and used my name to build their empire. Now everyone calls me the traitor. But tell me, how do you stay loyal to people who are already writing your obituary? Before we dive in, tell me, what time is it where you are? Because for me, that night never ended. The conference room felt colder than usual that morning. Maybe it was the rain, or maybe it was my father's silence. Thick, heavy, and unfamiliar. The men who usually spoke over one another sat perfectly still, their pens motionless. When the meeting adjourned, everyone moved fast, like birds startled by a gunshot. My father didn't move. He just sat there, his cufflinks glinting under the fluorescent light, his fingers trembling ever so slightly. "Stay for a minute, Maura." His voice had softened, but it carried that same weight that once made senators pause before speaking. I waited until the last set of footsteps faded down the hall before he reached into his briefcase. The sound of the zipper was the only thing breaking the silence. Then he slid an envelope across the polished mahogany table toward me. No seal, no logo, just my name, written in his hand. Uneven, as though his confidence had slipped with age. I frowned. "What is this?" "Not here," he whispered, his eyes darting to the tinted glass walls, as if someone could be listening. It wasn't the words that scared me. It was his eyes. They looked haunted. Like the man who once commanded entire boardrooms was now begging for time. My father never begged. I tried to lighten the air. "Dad, if this is about your estate, we can—" "Maura," he interrupted, sharper this time, but his hand trembled. "Go home, pack a bag. You have 24 hours. I blinked, waiting for the punchline. "What?" He didn't smile. A chill ran through me, spreading from my throat to my fingertips. He looked like he wanted to say more, but something, fear, guilt, maybe both, stopped him. I nodded slowly, unsure why I was agreeing to anything. "Okay, I'll go." As I left the room, I turned back once. He was staring at the door long after I'd walked through it. Driving home through Boston's early drizzle, the windshield wipers squeaked like they were complaining. My thoughts were a blur, half confusion, half dread. My father wasn't the type to unravel. He was the type to bury secrets deep enough that no one dared dig. The envelope sat beside me on the passenger seat, untouched. I couldn't bring myself to open it. It felt alive somehow, like whatever was inside could burn me. When the light turned red at Tremont Street, I thought of the last time I'd seen his hands shake. When I was 9, hiding behind the staircase while he fired half his executive team. I'd sworn that day I'd never let his world of fear swallow me whole. Yet here I was again, feeling small, trembling, waiting for the next explosion. The rain thickened. My reflection in the window looked like a stranger's, tired eyes, pale lips, the daughter of a man everyone feared, but I barely knew anymore. By the time I got home, the city lights had turned the wet pavement gold. I dropped my keys on the counter, kicked off my heels, and just stood there in the kitchen, staring at the envelope. The air felt heavier, like the house itself knew something I didn't. I poured a glass of water, set it down untouched, then tore the flap open. Inside were spreadsheets, offshore accounts, coded transfers, numbers, dates, places. My pulse quickened. My husband's name was everywhere. Levi, repeated like a stain that couldn't be washed out. I kept flipping through page after page until I reached a note written in my father's hand. "He's not who you think." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Levi managed most of my father's private investments. We'd met through him, married 2 years later. My father never liked him much, said he was too smooth, too polished. I thought it was jealousy, the old lion refusing to make room for a younger man. Now, staring at the proof in my hands, I realized it wasn't jealousy at all. It was warning. My phone buzzed, startling me. A text from Levi. Dinner in 20? I froze. 20 minutes. Did he already know I had seen this? Was this a trap or a test? I looked around the house, suddenly aware of every creak, every hum of the refrigerator. The walls felt closer, the lights too bright. My stomach tightened, my chest heavy. The envelope lay open on the counter, its contents scattered like ashes. I reached for my keys again. My hands didn't shake this time. I didn't even turn off the lights. I just grabbed my bag and drove. The highway melted behind me as the city lights faded into darkness. I didn't even know where I was going until I passed exit 41. Muscle memory took the wheel. The lake house, my father's old hideaway, tucked into the woods 2 hours north of Boston. It wasn't safe, not really, but it was the only place that felt separate from everything. Levi, the office, the lies. The further I drove, the thicker the fog grew. Trees clawed at the edge of the road, and my high beams cut through it like a blade, but only just. The lake was a mirror of frozen glass when I pulled in. I parked off the gravel and stepped out, breath fogging in the air. The house stood still, quiet, unsympathetic. A forgotten monument to all the things we never said. I hadn't been here since Mom's funeral. That kind of silence doesn't fade. It waits. Like grief with a front porch. I fumbled with the key. The lock stuck like it always had, but it gave way with a groan. Dust lifted as the door creaked open. The air inside was sharp, untouched, like time had frozen with the lake. I flipped the hallway light. It buzzed, flickered, and stayed dim. The silence pressed in again, only this time. It felt like I wasn't alone. In the corner above the fireplace, the red eye of the old security camera blinked once. Alive. That thing hadn't worked in years, or so I thought. I stood still, heart thudding. Then I shut the door behind me and dropped my bag, one step at a time, coat off, boots by the mat, trying to act normal in a place that no longer felt like mine. The phone rang. I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was Levi. I stared at his name for 3 rings before answering. "Hey," I said, trying to sound like nothing had changed. His voice was sweet, too sweet. "Hey, you sound tired, honey. Everything okay?" "Yeah, just laying low, with my sister." A pause. "Really? That's strange. I just texted her. She said she hasn't heard from you." My grip tightened on the phone. My mouth opened, but no words came. He didn't push. He didn't need to. His silence said enough. "I'm sure she just forgot to check her phone," I said quickly, heart racing. "Maybe." He paused again. "Well, let me know if you need anything." He hung up. I didn't even realize I was shaking until I put the phone down. The lie came too easily, but it didn't land. He knew, or he suspected. I couldn't tell which was worse. I paced the living room, arms crossed tight, replaying his voice in my head. What was that tone? Playful, mocking, calculating? "You have 24 hours. Run from what? Or who?" The wind rattled the windows. Somewhere in the house, water dripped steadily, syncing up with my heartbeat. I pressed my palms against the kitchen counter and tried to breathe. I made my way down the hall toward the study. My father's room. The door was ajar. That wasn't right. He never left it open. The chair was tipped over. Papers littered the floor like confetti from a war room. I stepped over a file labeled Holdings, now empty. The drawers were pulled halfway out. Someone had been here, and not long ago. I scanned the bookshelves, rows of thick hardcovers my father never actually read. One spine stood out. Crisis Management in Offshore Finance. I pulled it. Something shifted. A tiny thud. Inside the book, wedged in a hollowed-out middle, was a flash drive, blue plastic. A strip of masking tape across it read, Account Cobalt. His handwriting again. I stared at it, breath caught in my throat. No note this time, just that label. Account Cobalt. Whatever this was, it wasn't just shady. It was nuclear. I held it in my palm, the weight of it unreal. My father had left it here on purpose. Or maybe he hadn't. Maybe it was meant to stay hidden. If you're reading this, you already know too much. That line hit like ice down my back. I looked around. Every window now felt like a mirror. Every shadow had a shape. And that's when I heard it. A car engine. Not from the highway. Close. Too close. Headlights cut across the far window, casting two glowing stripes across the rug. I ducked fast, diving under the desk, clutching the flash drive like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. The car idled for a second. I held my breath. Then, footsteps, crunching gravel, closer. Then, silence. They were at the door. I didn't move. Another long pause, then the crunch of footsteps again, slower this time, retreating. Then the engine turned over and the car rolled away into the night. I stayed frozen under that desk for what felt like forever. When I finally crawled out, my knees stiff, my breath shaky, I moved to the window. The snow was fresh. When I stepped outside, the tire tracks were still warm in the snow. The tire tracks led down the narrow lane, curving out toward the main road. I stood there for a long time, staring at them like they might spell out who had come and why they left. But the snow didn't talk. It just kept falling. I went back inside, locked every door and window, and pulled the shades. The clock said 2:11 a.m., but sleep wasn't going to happen. Not with that flash drive sitting on the table like it was humming. I left it untouched for the rest of the night, pacing in and out of rooms, checking corners like a trapped animal. By the time morning came, the lake outside was a sheet of frozen silver under the sun. I watched it from the kitchen window as I boiled snow in a pot over the old stove. The tap hadn't been used in years, and I wasn't about to trust it now. Funny, the things you do when everything feels out of your control. Make coffee the hard way, count heartbeats, listen for footsteps that don't come. I wrapped my hands around the mug, more for comfort than heat. I felt brittle, like anything more might snap me in two. I kept thinking, how long had they both been lying to me? How many dinners, phone calls, holidays had been laced with secrets? I didn't even realize I was crying until a drop landed in the coffee. Eventually, I walked into the old office and found the cabin's laptop in the drawer beneath the desk. It was dusty, but it powered on. I plugged in the flash drive and held my breath. A folder tree popped up, company ledgers, donation records, transfers in coded amounts, multiple shell charities. One name repeated over and over, Levi Brennan. Another folder sat in the corner of the drive, labeled Echo 2019. I opened it. Inside were several audio files, just dates, no titles. My hand hovered over the first one. I clicked play. It was Levi's voice, calm, measured, but with that undertone I now recognized. Threat wrapped in silk. You'll sign it or your daughter's name goes down with the company. Either way, it's done. You just choose how public it gets. Silence. Then my father's voice, low, tired, different. If she ever finds out, it won't be from you. The audio ended there. I sat still, letting the weight of those words crush me slowly. They had both known. For years. My father hadn't protected me. He'd just moved the danger further down the road, hoping it wouldn't catch up. Levi hadn't fooled him. He'd bought him. I was never the reason. I was the leverage. I stood, walked outside without my coat. The cold hit my skin like needles. I didn't care. I walked across the porch and down to the edge of the frozen lake, coffee mug still in hand. The world was too quiet, too clean. I held the mug out and let it fall. It shattered against the ice, a sharp crack that echoed back like a scream. "I was the transaction," I whispered, and then louder, "You bastards used me." It wasn't rage yet, just a quiet kind of grief that made my legs weak and my hands ache. Eventually, I went back inside, changed into jeans and a sweater, and grabbed the flash drive. I needed food. I needed a bathroom that didn't freeze. But more than anything, I needed a minute to breathe. I drove into town, past shuttered gas stations and silent houses. It was still early. I pulled into the diner off Route 12, same one my father used to take me to for pancakes on Saturdays. Nothing had changed. Same cracked leather booths, same scent of bacon and old coffee. I sat near the window, ordered eggs and toast, and tried to look normal. A man 2 booths down had a newspaper folded in half. I noticed the logo right away, my father's company. It was a financial section, but he wasn't reading. He was watching me. He smiled when our eyes met. Not warm, not curious, just polite, too polite. I looked away, ate in silence. When I went to pay, the waitress smiled and said, "You're all set. Your friend already took care of it." I blinked. "My friend?" She gestured toward the empty booth. I ran outside. The man was gone. I stood there in the cold, scanning the lot. No cars, no movement. Just the same quiet paranoia wrapping tighter around my throat. Back in my car, I clutched the flash drive in one hand and the steering wheel in the other. "If Levi was watching," I whispered, "so was whoever that man worked for." I couldn't stay out here any longer. This wasn't just about Levi now. This was bigger, cleaner, more dangerous. There was only one person left who might give me something straight. Charles Darden, my father's old attorney. The one who stayed on even when the rest of the board turned. I started the car. Or tried to. And that's when I saw it. When I turned the key, I saw it. A small red light blinking beneath the steering wheel. I stared at the blinking red light, its slow pulse like a heartbeat I didn't own. My hand moved on instinct, reaching under the steering wheel, fingers wrapping around the small black box until it clicked loose. I held it in my palm, smooth, cold, branded with a serial number I didn't recognize until I did. Bren Secure, Levi's company, his private security firm. I felt something hollow out inside me. This wasn't just about watching. This was control. It was never trust. It was management. He didn't protect me. He tracked me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I took the tracker, placed it on the passenger seat, and drove away calmly, like I was just another woman on a cold New England morning, heading into town for groceries. I stopped at a gas station 20 miles out, small enough to be forgettable. I filled the tank with shaking hands, stepped inside, bought a burner phone with cash, and walked straight to the back where the trash compactor sat humming. I dropped my old phone in without a second glance and hit the button. The crunch felt final. Boston didn't welcome me back. It stood gray and disapproving under the winter sky, towers of glass stretching into clouds, like they were trying to escape whatever mess they held below. I parked 3 blocks away from my father's office, slipping into side streets like a ghost. I'd walked these blocks for years, errands, meetings, coffee runs, but now every brick felt unfamiliar. I kept my head down. Funny how you can spend your whole life in a cage and only notice the bars when someone else holds the key. Charles Halpern had been my father's attorney since I was in college. Sharp, quiet, always dressed like he was headed to a funeral. He greeted me at the door of his office with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Maura," he said, his voice buttered with sympathy. "You look tired." "I haven't been sleeping much," I said. "Busy being erased, you know." He chuckled, like I was joking. I wasn't. The office smelled like old books and varnish. I sat across from him, the flash drive between us. He took it, but didn't even blink. No surprise, no hesitation. "Interesting," he said. "Your father said you might bring something?" That stung. "He told you I'd come?" "In his way," Charles replied, setting the drive aside without plugging it in. He reached into a drawer and slid a manila folder across the desk. "Your father's will, updated yesterday." I opened it. My name was gone. Instead, everything, his stake in the company, personal accounts, real estate, was redirected to a trust in Levi's foundation. Clean, tidy, erased. I stared at the paper like it might morph into something else, something fair. "I don't understand," I said softly. "He made the decision clear," Charles said, folding his hands. "It was time to secure the future. Levi has influence, access, stability." I let out a bitter laugh. "He also has Cayman accounts, bribes, and blood on his hands." Charles's smile faded. "Maura, this doesn't need to become difficult. Levi offered to smooth things over. You won't be left with nothing." So that was it. A bribe, dressed up in legal terms. My father had known. He'd seen the trap and still handed Levi the pen. I stood slowly. My voice was calm, measured. "Tell him this," I said. "I'm not gone yet." I turned, leaving the flash drive behind on his desk. Let him think I gave up the only leverage I had. Outside, the air had thickened. A black sedan sat across the street, engine running. I didn't stop walking. Half a block later, it eased forward. I turned the corner, ducked into the subway entrance. The platform buzzed with tired commuters and blinking advertisements. I moved through the crowd without looking back, steps purposeful but unhurried. They were following me now. But I wasn't running, I was leading. And I was done being hunted. It was time to hunt back. The black sedan was still parked across the street, tucked behind a delivery van like it belonged there. But it didn't. Not to me, not anymore. I turned the corner, pulled the hood of my coat tighter around my face, and slipped into my rental 2 blocks down. My fingers moved quickly, steady, even though I could feel my heart pushing against my ribs. I connected my burner phone to the tracker I'd swiped from my car and launched a GPS mirror app Levi had insisted we install during one of our safety talks. His words. Always cloaked in concern, always layered with control. Within seconds, a red dot blinked on the screen. The sedan. I smiled, small, quiet, almost surprised by my own steadiness. "I used to be the woman who waited for someone else to call the shots," I whispered, easing into traffic. "Not tonight." I tailed the car from a distance, keeping just enough space between us to blend in with the late commuters. The streets grew emptier as we moved away from the city center. Streetlights dimming, shops closed tight, sidewalks barren except for the wind curling around trash cans. I stayed close. One red light, one turn, one warehouse gate later, and we were deep into the industrial belly of Boston. The car pulled into a lot lined with corrugated metal buildings and loading docks. I rolled past slowly, then turned down a side road and parked behind a row of dumpsters. I killed the engine and sat in the dark, letting the silence settle. From the shadows, I could see the man step out of the sedan. He was tall, lean, dressed like he worked security, too clean-cut for this part of town. He raised his phone and started speaking. My phone buzzed. Not a call, a connection. Levi's name lit up on my screen. My Bluetooth had synced to the car earlier. Somehow the signal picked up his end of the conversation. I didn't question it. I listened. "She has the flash drive?" Levi's voice came through, cool and clipped. "Then get it. I don't care how." The man paused. "And her father?" "Handled," Levi said flatly. "He won't interfere again." The sentence hung in the air like poison. My mouth went dry. A part of me had held on, hoped my father's silence was something softer, something like shame. But this was annihilation, erasure again. First from the will, now from his world. I sat there, breathless. I didn't cry, I focused. And suddenly, I was 6 years old again, sitting on the kitchen floor, my father kneeling in front of me, showing me how to loop the laces on my sneakers. "Always make your own knots," he'd said. "Don't let anyone else tie them for you." Back then, it was about independence. Now, it felt like survival. I gripped the phone tighter. "Then I'll untie his lies," I murmured. I moved fast, parked my car in the open, near the dock. No hiding it. Let them find it. Let them think I was careless, desperate. Then I slid into a shadow between two shipping containers, crouching with my phone camera ready. I opened a blank message, typed out one line, and sent it to Levi's number from the burner. "We need to talk. I know everything." 10 minutes passed, then headlights. A second car pulled in. Silver SUV, newer model. Levi stepped out, polished like he always was. Suit tailored, coat crisp, face unreadable. He looked around, almost casual, like he was about to meet a friend. Instead, another man approached him. Older, thicker around the middle, carrying a black briefcase. They didn't shake hands. The deal unfolded quickly. Quiet voices, sharp glances. Levi opened the case, showed him something inside. I couldn't see what. The man nodded, said something, and Levi handed the briefcase over. I zoomed in, hit record. This wasn't just money laundering, this was infrastructure, proof. The kind people like Levi never thought would surface. And then, just as Levi turned back toward his car, I heard it. His voice, clear, cold. "I want it done tonight," he said. "Maura can't run if she's not breathing." I swallowed hard. The other man asked, "You sure?" "She's already gone too far, and if she goes public—" He stopped, then said my name like a sentence. "Maura." A beat of silence. "Eliminate." There was a beat of silence. Then the word echoed through the still night, cutting clean through my chest. Eliminate. I didn't wait. I was already moving, already gone. My tires screeched against the cold asphalt as I drove away from the docks, every muscle in my body coiled tight. I couldn't think straight, only hear his voice looping in my head. My husband. My husband, the man I had trusted with everything, had just ordered my death like it was an errand. I drove until the skyline disappeared behind me, until the world shrank down to one blinking motel sign on a lonely stretch of highway. Vacancy. I pulled in, parked under a flickering light, and sat there until the engine cooled. My hands trembled as I killed the ignition. Inside the room, everything smelled of cheap detergent and forgotten stories. I sat on the edge of the bed, my coat still on, my fingers wrapped around the burner phone. I replayed the recording. Levi's voice filled the dark again. "Maura can't run if she's not breathing." My reflection in the mirror didn't look like me. Hair tangled, eyes wide, skin pale as the wallpaper. I tried to recognize the woman who had once shared a bed with that voice. "How did I sleep beside a man plotting my disappearance?" I whispered. That question stayed unanswered. The tears came slow at first, then faster, until they weren't tears anymore, just soundless shaking. Then, just as suddenly, laughter slipped through. Sharp, broken laughter that turned into silence. It was too much. I let it all crash through me, the lies, the fear, the exhaustion, until there was nothing left to burn. Then came the thought I had been avoiding since Boston. Dad tried to save me, and I still ran toward the fire. I leaned back against the headboard, staring at the ceiling's water stains until the lines blurred. That was my bottom. That was the moment the grief stopped being noise and started to make sense. I must have dozed off because the TV was flickering when I opened my eyes. Some late-night news channel. The anchor's voice was too calm for what she was saying. Breaking news: Delaney Holdings, the Boston-based financial group, is now under federal investigation for alleged offshore laundering. Sources confirm that Maura Delaney, the late CEO's daughter, is being sought for questioning as a potential accomplice. My name. Spoken like a headline. My life turned into a scandal. Levi had done it. He'd beaten me to the punch, feeding them the narrative before I could even breathe. The man who wanted me gone now painted me as guilty. I grabbed the remote and hurled it at the wall. The screen went black, but the fury that followed wasn't blind this time. It was sharp, useful. I pulled out my laptop and checked the news online. My photo was everywhere, from charity events, company galas, interviews I barely remembered. Every caption twisted the story. Every quote painted me as complicit. Levi was erasing me. In real time. Then the phone buzzed. Unknown number. Text: I know what he did. Don't call the police. Meet me at Hanover Diner. 3 a.m. I stared at it for a long time. Could be a trap. Probably was. But I couldn't sit here waiting for someone else to write my obituary. By 2:45, I was pulling into the Hanover lot. The neon sign buzzed, casting the snow in dull pink light. The diner was almost empty, just the night cook, a waitress who looked like she'd seen too much, and one woman in the back booth. Late 40s, trench coat. Eyes like she hadn't slept in years. She looked up as I approached. "You came." "Should I not have?" I asked, sliding into the booth. "That depends," she said, her voice low, "on how badly you want the truth." She reached into her bag and pulled out a manila envelope, the kind that had weight. "Your father wasn't corrupt," she said. "He was forced. I used to work for them." Them. Levi's network, the offshore fronts, the shell foundations, all of it. Your father tried to stop it years ago. But Levi had leverage. Your name, his health, his company. She slid the envelope across the table. Inside were papers, copies of ledgers, wire transfers, sign-offs, even emails, all pointing back to the same corporate shell. "This is how you bury an empire," she said, "from within." I flipped through the pages, my pulse quickening. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I can't go public," she said simply. "And because you're the only one left who still believes in what's right." I let out a shaky breath. "If I take this to the FBI..." She cut me off. "If you go to the feds, he walks free. They own too much. Levi has people in their pockets, judges, agents, it's all compromised." I looked at her, trying to find some trace of truth. "Then who do I trust?" She stood, slipping out of the booth. "Not people," she said, and scribbled something on a napkin. "Trust proof." When I looked down, she was gone. Only the napkin remained, soaked slightly with coffee. One line written in blue ink. Trust proof, not people. The papers were still spread open on the table, my hands trembling as I gathered them. That's when I saw it, near the bottom of the stack. A list of names under a heading marked Cobalt Accounts. And there, printed clear as daylight, was mine. I looked down at the files and saw one name I never expected to find. Mine. When the door to the diner closed behind the woman in the trench coat, I stayed at the booth for a long moment, letting the reality settle like snowfall on still ground. She had left the envelope, the words "trust proof," not people, scrawled on a coffee-stained napkin beside it. I sat there, watching steam curl up from the ceramic mug in front of me, thinking that if I was going to fight this, I'd have to stop being invisible. In the weeks since leaving Boston, I had turned the tables piece by piece. I was no longer the daughter who believed in her father's empire or in her husband's smile. I was the woman who had no safety net, no easy ally, and nothing left to lose. And in that place of nothing, I found a purpose. Back at the motel, I had sorted through the documents left by the diner contact. Shell companies, offshore trusts, fake foundations, my name. All of it twisted to fit a narrative that suited Levi Brennan perfectly. I watched my father's handwriting replicate mine, a signature I had never authorized. I remembered the day I joined the company, filled out my onboarding paperwork, smiled at Levi as he introduced me around, signed the forms without reading them deeply. What I didn't know then was that I was signing my own indictment. While reviewing the documents here, in that little motel room with the cheap fluorescent light buzzing overhead, I found the signature that matched mine exactly. Not just similar handwriting, but the same curve of the M, the subtle slant of the R, the way I finished the loop on the A. I felt a cold spike of anger. He didn't just steal my trust, he used it as ink. I packed everything into a folder, zipped it tight, and I knew, this is where clarity began. I left the motel before dawn. The sky was still gray, the kind of early morning light that doesn't promise anything yet. I drove out of the parking lot, through the foggy streets of the city, waking up. My reflection in the rearview mirror was tired, but resolute. I whispered to myself, if they already made me the villain, I might as well choose my ending. A few hours later, I pulled up to the childhood home, my mother's house, long empty now. I used to hate this place, the way it smelled of old carpets and memories I couldn't escape. Now I came back because I needed something I'd left there years ago. In the upstairs bedroom, under a stack of photo albums, I found a photograph. My father holding me as a toddler, his arms strong, his eyes warm. On the back, in his handwriting, a code, letters and numbers, scratched quickly. Key A14. I sat on the floor, the photo on my lap, the code burning in my mind. Back at my laptop, I plugged in the backup drive and watched a new folder pop up at exactly 7:04 a.m. Time-stamped, if you're reading this, I'm gone. The folder's name was Ariadne. In it, hidden assets, offshore trusts, personal notes from my father. Don't fight them alone. Use the maze I'd built. My heart squeezed. My father had known. He had left me a map, just in time. I sat back, letting grief and pride wash through me at once. It wasn't just that I'd been framed, it was that I had been armed. Later that afternoon, I made the call. The woman I met at Hanover Diner, her voice crackled with static. I said, "You were right, I won't go to the feds, but I'm not hiding either." I loaded all the documents, videos, encrypted data into a drive labeled Truth Zo1. My fingers moved steadily, each file a bullet in a war no one saw coming. I whispered to the empty room, if they want a war of silence, I'll give them a war of proof. As dusk settled, my phone lit up. Unknown number, a single message. We know where you are. Stop digging. I paused, reading it, and then I exhaled. Calm. I allowed a small smile. Good, I whispered. Then we're finally in the same place. Tonight the war begins, not in a courtroom, but in his office. And I was walking straight into the fire with my own torch lit. The city had barely stirred awake when I stepped through the glass doors of Delaney Tower. The sun caught the marble floors, but nothing inside sparkled anymore, not after what I knew. The receptionist froze. 2 security guards glanced up but didn't move. I didn't look at any of them. I just walked. People whispered. My name, no doubt. Headlines had done their job. Heiress turned fugitive, Delaney daughter behind collapse. But I moved like the headlines didn't matter anymore. They taught me fear was control, I said under my breath, the words like armor. I learned silence was strategy. I took the elevator to the top. No disguise, no hesitation. Every ding of the floor counter felt like a bell counting down to reckoning. When the doors opened, I stepped into the lion's den. Levi was already in mid-performance. Sleeves rolled, a tie slightly loosened for that under-pressure but honest look. The boardroom was full, men and women in suits, stiff with polite concern. He was preaching about legacy and stability. My father's name was coming out of his mouth like perfume, sweet, smooth, entirely fake. He didn't see me until gasps broke the room's rhythm. "Don't stop on my account," I said, setting the flash drive on the polished wood table. "I brought story time." Levi's mouth twitched, just slightly, enough for me to see the fear behind his curated face. I plugged the drive into the projector port. The screen behind him flickered. Then it began. Wire transfers, hidden trusts, charity accounts rerouted into private holdings, offshore names that sounded made up, because they were, pages of coded transactions, all with Levi's digital signature trail. "This," I said calmly, "is the truth you buried under my father's name. But dirt doesn't keep secrets. It just waits." The room chilled. No one moved. "You wanted a public story?" I looked him straight in the eyes. "Here's one." He didn't blink, didn't flinch. He smiled. "You think you're clever, Mora?" he said, reaching inside his briefcase. "You always did love a performance." He pulled out a tablet, tapped the screen, and turned it toward the room. On the projector, a video started playing. It was me, crying, speaking into a camera, voice shaky and raw. The video version of me said, "I falsified records. I siphoned money. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to." My hands clenched at my sides. The room stirred. "See?" Levi said, voice smooth. "She's unstable. She's been off her medication for years. This," he waved toward the drive I brought, "is the result of a paranoid breakdown. That video's from 6 months ago." A few board members shifted uncomfortably. Doubt crept into the air like mold. I exhaled through my nose, steady. Then, slowly, I clicked into a second folder on the drive. Ariadne. I pulled up a timeline my father had built into the files, a set of security cam timestamps, location pings, and blockchain verifiable records. The day Levi claimed I filmed that confession, I was in Denver, in a bank vault, with my father's encrypted laptop, on video, verified. The confession? Deepfake. Layered audio, mismatched shadows. A good fake, but not good enough. "These files," I said, looking around the room, "were time-locked. By my father, before he died. You can check the blockchain yourself. They verify his hand, not mine." I clicked again. The deepfake split-screened with my real footage. The proof stared them all in the face. Silence. Then a sound I'll never forget. The chair Levi had been standing beside scraped against the floor as he lunged. He didn't reach me. Security was already moving. 2 guards wrestled him back, but not before he hissed, "You think this ends with a slideshow?" I leaned in, low enough only he could hear. "You erased me from your story," I said. "I just wrote the ending." As they dragged him away, he shouted something unintelligible, rage scrambling his words. The room stayed frozen. Then one by one, the board members turned back to the screen. The mess laid bare. The empire exposed. I didn't wait for their verdict. I didn't need it. I walked out, past the receptionist who now looked more like a witness than a gatekeeper. Past the lobby that no longer sparkled with illusion. Outside, the air was cold, familiar. The sky looked the same, but I wasn't the same woman walking under it. When I stepped outside the tower, the sky looked the same, but I wasn't the same woman walking under it. The air hit my face like a whisper rather than a slap, and I realized the silence around me wasn't just absence, it was relief. It was over. 2 weeks passed. The world kept spinning, news kept churning, and the headlines moved on to fresher scandals and brighter distractions. But every so often, Levi's mugshot flashed across the TV screen. greasy hair, sunken eyes. A man who once wore power like a tailored suit, now looking like the cautionary tale he'd become. I didn't watch the trial, didn't sit in the back row or refresh news sites for updates. I didn't need to. I'd already seen everything I needed to see. Justice, for me, wasn't a gavel slamming on oak. It was the quiet that followed the storm. Justice is silence, when the noise finally stops. That morning, I walked along the harbor, the same pier where my father used to go when things got too loud. He'd bring me here sometimes, back when I still believed everything he touched turned to gold. He used to say the water made things clearer. He was right. The reflection of the skyline shimmered on the tide, soft and broken, but still there. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I almost ignored it, but then I saw the sender, unknown, no subject line. Inside was a single message. You kept your father's legacy clean. He'd be proud. Attached was a photo. My father, maybe 20 years younger, smiling at a shareholders' event. I was standing in the corner of the frame, 8 years old, wearing a headband too tight and shoes that squeaked on marble floors. There was no signature, just a timestamp. I didn't need a name. The weight that settled over me wasn't grief this time. It was peace, the kind that wraps itself around your ribs and just sits there, letting you breathe. Back at the apartment, I found the envelope. I'd nearly forgotten it, the one my father gave me at the very beginning, back before the chaos spilled out, before the lies rotted through the floorboards of everything I thought I knew. It had survived unopened through all of this, tucked behind a drawer, quiet as a promise. Inside, there was just one piece of paper, handwritten, no logo, no drama. I knew you'd find the truth. Don't save the company, save yourself. And beneath it, a small brass key. I stared at it for a long time. Then I pulled out the laptop, searched the city's storage facility databases, and found the locker. It was under an alias I hadn't heard since childhood, one my father used when taking us on secret getaways from the boardroom circus. The unit was small, cold, and clean. Inside was a wooden box. Inside that, an old photo album with pictures of my mother I'd never seen. Her laugh frozen in time, her eyes always on me or my father. Tucked into the lining was her wedding ring, worn smooth. Next to it, a folded bank statement showing a dormant account in my name, untouched, quietly growing. Enough to start over, enough to build. There was a note folded around the ring. For your new beginning, not for theirs. That's when it hit me. The envelope hadn't been a safety net or a backup plan. It wasn't about running or revenge. It was about permission to let go, to live a life that wasn't carved out by legacy or shadowed by scandal. I cried, not the kind of sobs that rattle through your chest, but quiet ones, clean, the kind that rinse you out. That night, I opened a new account under a new name, the Ariadne Trust. I transferred every asset from the dormant account, plus the anonymous donor fund I'd quietly set up using the offshore keys from my father's files. It would become a foundation for whistleblowers, women trapped in silence, people who'd been chewed up and discarded by the same kind of machine that once nearly swallowed me. I didn't want the corner office. I didn't want the Delaney name on a building anymore. The maze ends, I whispered as I signed the final papers, where I stopped being afraid to walk it. 3 days later, I returned to Delaney Tower, not to reclaim anything, just to say goodbye. The top floor was quiet, the lights were low. I stepped into my father's old office, the same place where so many lies had been planned, polished, sold. But it looked smaller now. The morning sun crept in through the windows, washing everything in a pale orange glow. I stood there a moment, breathing it in. I didn't need the chair behind the desk. I didn't need the weight of that title. I left the door open behind me as I walked out. He built an empire of fear. I'll build one of truth. I walked out of that tower, not as his daughter, not as his heir, but as myself.